In early February 2022, ESPN decided to release a list of the top 100 players in MLB history, and it was controversial, to say the least. It was full of hot takes, and those hot takes begot more hot takes.
It's just like you played in the 1900s. And I don't like saying this because I love Ozzie Smith, but I think he's the most overrated player of all time, possibly. Bob Feller, sure. I really don't know, though, if he's better than Clayton Kershaw. I really don't. Man, I know Wade Boggs was great, but I just tend to put Chipper Jones ahead of him. Play-wise, was he better than Mike Piazza? No.
But it did get me thinking. What would a top 100 NPB players list look like? Well, after another video I was planning on making hit the footage brick wall, I decided to go for it and do it myself. So, I scoured the records list and assembled over 360 players and got to work whittling them down to 100. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to fall into some sentimental BS when I make lists like this, so I wanted to come up with a formula. First, the inherent basis of my list is wins above replacement. Is it a perfect stat? Hell no. Is it the best thing for what I'm trying to do here? Yes. But just listing the top 100 players by WAR would be too easy, and it would also leave some of the biggest names off the ballot for the simple reason that they did not play long enough. So here's what I came up with. And I'm going to be using one of my favorite players, Sachio Kinugasa, as an example. Kinugasa accumulated 61.7 WAR over his career. That's quite good. But to prevent this from being a list of pure accumulators, I divided it by the amount of seasons he played in order to get his average WAR per season. I then multiplied that average by his 7-year peak WAR in order to get a score. In this case, Kinugasa's score was 66.3. This puts him in 188th place on the list. There's a few other quick things about how I did this. First, for the purpose of culling the numbers, the minimum number of seasons a player needed to play to qualify for this list is 5. This eliminates several rising stars like Munetaka Murakami and Masato Morishita, but maybe I could update this list when they become eligible. Second, 7-year peak WAR will not skip over periods in which the player of question was out of the league either due to injury or due to being an MLB. The lone exception to this will be the 1945 season, which was cancelled. If a player played less than 7 years consecutively, whatever their longest streak of consecutive seasons is will be used as their peak. Third, outside of a select few, I don't have access to the wins above replacement numbers for pitchers who pitched in the 2021 season. In those cases, the 2021 season will be disregarded. However, only one of said pitchers made the top 100. And finally, since wins above replacement does not tend to favor relief pitchers, their wins above replacement will be multiplied by 1.5 in order to compensate for that. No relievers made the top 100 though, so it won't really affect this video. We all caught up? Good. The player's name and rank will be in the top left corner, their career stats will be at the bottom, and their score will be at the top right. I'll put a Google Doc of the spreadsheet in the description if you want to comb through the whole thing. And with that settled, let's just jump into it. We'll start rapid fire and then steadily get more detailed as we keep going. Number 100, Kaoru Beto. The first ever Pacific League MVP and Japan Series MVP, Beto was one of the greatest power hitters of the 50s, even if he's only really known on this side of the Pacific for being the guy who appears on the dude's shirt. Number 99, Jack Bloomfield. After never breaking through to the bigs despite some fantastic seasons in AAA, Jack Bloomfield got the call from his friend Ron Bottler with an invitation to come join the Kintetsu Buffaloes. All Bloom would do for the next 7 years was rake, winning 2 batting titles and setting a Kintetsu Buffaloes record for batting average with a whopping .374. Had he played in the modern age with more advanced analytics, he definitely would have lasted longer, as despite only putting up 6 homers, he still had a 133 WRC+ in his final season. Number 98, Shigeru Takata. Takata joined the Giants smack dab in the middle of their 9 straight championships, and was dominant out of the gate, winning 1968 SEAL Rookie of the Year. His career would get a second wind when he took over from Shigeo Nagashima at third base, where he put up 3 straight elite defensive seasons. Number 97, Daryl Spencer. Spencer was one of the first great foreign hitters in NPB history, as the Hankyu Brave Stars' hyper-analytical approach to hitting led him to challenge for a Triple Crown in 1965. But the first great intentional walk controversy and a car accident put a stop to that. Spencer would later come out of retirement to act as a player coach for the Braves, helping steer them towards their 1970s dynasty. Number 96, Masahiro Doi. Though his name is forever tainted by his involvement with the Black Mist scandal, Doi is still one of the greatest offensive players of his era, even putting up a 40-homer season in 1971, and then hitting 34 in 1975 to win the PL Home Run King award. His 465 home runs and career 137 WRC Plus is nothing to sneeze at. Number 95, Michio Arito. Before Hiromitsu Ochiai came along, Arito was the face of the Lotte Orions, though he was a bit overrated defensively. He was still the best third baseman in Pacific League for most of the 70s, putting up at least 20 dingers in 10 of his first 11 seasons, with a WRC Plus that never fell below 120. Number 94, Greg Boomer Wells. Not to be confused with David, Wells is one of the most beloved foreign players in NPB history, winning a Triple Crown in 1984 and picking up 2 batting titles, 4 Hit King awards, and even won the PL RBI King award in his final season with the Daiei Hawks. Number 93, Tatsurohiro Oka. Although he's far more famous for his time as one of NPB's most dictatorial managers, Hiro Oka was an elite defensive shortstop with the Giants for more than a decade, and would probably have a few gold gloves under his belt had the award been given out when he was playing. Number 92, Tokuji Nagaike. With 4 40-homer seasons under his belt, Nagaike is probably the most underrated power hitter in NPB history. And while his career was pretty much over by the time the Braves had actually started winning championships, there would be no Braves dynasty without Nagaike being the tour de force he was on the turn of the 70s teams. Number 91, Shosei Go. Taiwanese sensation Shosei Go was arguably the best player in JPBL during the Second World War, putting up both elite offensive and defensive numbers during an admittedly turbulent time in the league's history. Immediately after the war, Go tried his hand at pitching, and threw a frickin' no-hitter. He also joined Mainichi's super team in 1950 and helped lead them to the first ever Japan series. Number 90, Toshiya Sugiuchi. The baby-faced ace of the Hawks staff throughout most of the 2000s, Sugiuchi was a dependable strikeout machine for most of his career. He joined the Giants in 2012, but slowly declined until he retired in 2015. Still, the 2005 PL MVP had a fantastic career, with over 2,000 strikeouts and a FIP minus of 81. Number 89, Masaaki Ikenaga. Oh, it could have been. Ikenaga was the best pitcher in NPB when he got wrapped up in the Black Mist scandal and was banned for life. Although his ban is probably the most trivial of all, because he wasn't out there throwing games, he was just scamming the idiots trying to do that. In short, he's the shoeless Joe Jackson of NPB. Number 88, Masataka Yoshida. The first bright spot of the post-merger Buffaloes, Yoshida has been the face of the franchise pretty much since his debut in 2016, averaging at least 5 WAR seasons since 2018 in a Buffaloes lineup that has generally been lacking offensively. And he's still getting better too, posting a career-high 193 WRC Plus and picking up his second straight batting title in 2021. Number 87, Tom O'Malley. The biggest foreign star of the early 90s, O'Malley was a career 300, 400, 500 hitter who had a 154 WRC Plus in his short stint in Japan. He had a ridiculously high BABIP and won 4 straight OBP titles, basically making him a sabermetric darling. 100% deserved his 1995 CL MVP. Number 86, Atsuya Furuta. The best defensive catcher of the 90s, Furuta excellently balanced a large rotating cast of arms during his 18 years behind the plate with the Swallows, directing 3 no-hitters in the process. An incredibly smart and disciplined man, he was the face of the players' union during the merger crisis of 2004, expertly negotiating on behalf of the players while also swaying the public into their camp. He won 2 MVP awards and 10 gold gloves. Number 85, Hideo Nomo. Nomo won the pitching Triple Crown as a rookie. That speaks for itself. He was the PL win king and strikeout king in each of his first 4 seasons, and then forced the posting system into existence when he decided to leap over and join the Dodgers in 1995. And he did all this while being one of the most chaotic pitchers in NPB history. I mean, look at his K to BB ratio. Number 84, Warren Cromartie. The Black Samurai. Crow is the kind of guy an MLB team would never let go of nowadays. But the Expos' loss was the Giants' gain, as he locked down the Giants' outfield for most of the 80s, transitioning from a power guy in the first half of his career to a contact-hitting OBP god in the later years of the power-mad 80s. Crow also hit the first professional home run in the Tokyo Dome's history on opening day 1988. Number 83, Isau Shibata. Shibata roamed Korakuen's outfield for 2 decades as the Giants' primary center fielder, playing elite defense and winning 6 Stolen Base King awards throughout his career. Had the award been introduced earlier, he would definitely have more than the 5 Gold Gloves he won during his career. Number 82, Masayasu Kanida. The first in a long line of great Tigers outfielders, Kanida won the first post-war batting title and went on to become a 3-time All-Star after the JBL became NPB in 1950. Number 81, Nobuhiro Matsura. Locking down the hot corner in Fukuoka for the last 15 years, it's hard to find a better defensive infielder in NPB history. As he's gotten older, he's turned on the power too, with 3 30-homer campaigns since 2015. Number 80, Tyrone Woods. After spending 4 years in Seoul with the Doosan Bears, Tyrone Woods came over to NPB, hitting 40 homers in his first season in Yokohama, and winning the first of 3 home run titles. He later joined the Dragons and helped them finally break their championship drought in 2007. Woods is one of the best examples of taking the Asian route to stardom, as he made his mark in both KBO and NPB. Number 79, John Shippen. The Filipino face of the Taiyo Whales in the early 70s. Despite being notoriously difficult to work with, Shippen was damn good. Both an elite hitter and fielder, his biggest hang-up was that he would only listen to 2 people, Clete Boyer and Shigeru Nagashima. If you were anyone else, brick wall. Classic case of a diva who had the skills to justify being a diva. Number 78, Gichiro Shiraki. Shiraki was one of the bright spots on an awful Tokyo Senators team when they got started post-war. Sadly, this led to him being criminally overused, to the tune of 40-plus starts and 400-plus innings per year in 1946 and 47. Despite that, he was still able to put up an ERA of 1.74 in 1947. Number 77, Juzo Sanita. Another post-war pitcher with a criminally high workload, Sanita was the ace of the Robins pretty much throughout their entire existence, winning the first Sawamura Award of the NPB era as they led them to represent Central League in the first ever Japan series. Number 76, Kenji Jojima. One of my personal idols growing up, Joe was the best all-around catcher of the 90s generation, guiding the Hawks to 2 titles behind the plate. Had he not joined the Mariners in 06, he'd probably be higher up this list, as he picked up right where he left off when he came back to NPB with the Tigers in 2010. Number 75, Tadashi Wakabayashi. Born Henry Wakabayashi, he was the first ace of the Tigers, as well as the man who popularized aces wearing 18. Like Beto and Go before him, he joined the Orion Super Team in 1950 and is credited with the first win in Japan Series history, at 42 years of age. Number 74, Ryohei Hasegawa. Without Hasegawa, the Hiroshima Carp would not exist. It's as simple as that. When the league threatened them with contraction in 1952, Hasegawa was the workhorse, propping up an awful pitching staff all by himself as the Carp finished 3.5 games up on the Shochiku Robins. Hasegawa would be rewarded when the Carp turned it around, and he won 30 games in 1955, picking up the first Win King Award in Hiroshima Carp history. It would be nearly 20 years before another Carp starter won the award. Number 73, Nobuhiko Matsunaka. In an era dominated by several of the biggest, baddest foreign power hitters in NPB history, Matsunaka was their Japanese equivalent, as the Kyushu boy was the scariest hitter on the Hawks during the turn of the millennium, putting up 2 40-homer campaigns and picking up 2 PL MVP awards in the process. Number 72, Haruki Nishikawa. Thanks to having absolutely no pop in his bat, which seems to be a common problem for the current fighters, Nishikawa was often overlooked when the fighters were at the top of Pacific League in the mid-2010s. But he was an excellent table setter for the big bats that used to come up after him in the lineup. Though his defense is a bit overrated, his 3 Stolen Base King awards are nothing to sneeze at. Number 71, Kenjiro Tamiya. Originally a pitcher, Tamiya transitioned to center field in 1952 and never looked back. Though his numbers from the plate don't look terribly impressive, by the standards of the time, he raked, picking up a batting title in 1958. Number 70, Shoji Murata. The first Japanese pitcher to get Tommy John surgery, Murata spent 23 seasons as the ace of the Lotte Orions, basically pitching until his arm fell off, picking up 3 ERA titles, including one when he was 40 years old. He's also the only pitcher to win an ERA title and a Save King award in the same season, which he did in 1975 when he started 17 games and saved a further 13. Oh yeah, 11 of those 17 starts were complete games. Number 69, Shinichi Ito. Though his time after playing for the Dragons was not great, when Ito was roaming the outfield of Nagoya Stadium, there were few players in CL that were better than him. In 1965, he put up the third best WRC Plus in Central League, behind only O and Nagashima. Although no one could have known it at the time because WOBA and WRC Plus didn't exist. Number 68, Keishi Suzuki. One of the most imposing pitchers of his era, the original Mr. Buffalo was an absolutely dominant force on the mound, winning 8 Strikeout King awards and pitching a Triple Crown in 1978. There was no one else like him in Buffalo's history, and the fact that Oryx unretired his number is a travesty. Number 67, Bobby Rose. After O'Malley retired in 1996, Bobby Rose was the best foreign player in Central League. He was the focal point of the Baystars' machine gun offense, leading them to just their second title in 1998. His best season was 1999, when he broke Fumio Fujimura's CL record for hits with 192 while driving in 153 runs, good for second all time. Despite being a fan favorite, he never really jived well with Japan, and he retired in his prime after the 2000 season after having the audacity to ask to be paid what he was worth. Still, he'll never have to buy a beer in Yokohama as long as he lives. Number 66, Tadashi Sugiura. The gentleman ace of the Nankai Hawks, Sugiura is another case of a pitcher being criminally overused early in his career. Despite winning Rookie of the Year in 1958 and pitching a Triple Crown in 1959, he was often forced to pitch until he couldn't feel his arm anymore. Even when Joe Stanko was there to take the weight off him, he just couldn't keep up. Sugiura was also nearly loaned to the Chicago White Sox for a few games at the end of the 1960 season, which would have made him the first Japanese player to play in MLB. However, the Hawks got back into contention and backed out. Number 65, Tetsuya Yonera. Another PL ace from the 60s, Yoneda served at the front end of the rotation for the Hankyu Braves for 19 seasons before a sudden trade with the Tigers when the Braves were in the middle of their dynasty. Yoneda had actually tried to join the Tigers after he signed with the Braves in 1956, but that didn't fly in court. Still, Yoneda sits second all time in both wins and games played, and has an MVP and ERA title under his belt. Number 64, Hiroshi Oshita. The first player to grace the cover of Baseball magazine in April of 1946, the Taiwanese-raised Oshita was actually forced into a kamikaze unit near the end of the war, but thankfully the war ended before his pilot training was finished. He joined the Tokyo Senators immediately after the war and became one of the most popular players on that terrible, terrible team. His popularity was one of the main reasons Tokyo bought the struggling team and renamed them the Flyers. He was traded to the Nishitetsu Lions after being accused of stealing team funds to support his meth-addicted mother, a move which caused a near riot among Flyers fans. He'd immediately become one of the faces of the Lions, leading them to 4 pennants and 3 Japan Series titles before retiring in 1959. Number 63, Yoshio Itoi. An on-base machine, Yoshio Itoi spent the better part of a decade putting up an OBP above or near 400 almost every year. And he put that to good use too, regularly swiping over 20 bags and even racking up 50 steals in 2016. Despite his defense being pretty overrated and never hitting more than 19 homers in a season, his overall offensive production was still good enough to generate over 50 wins above replacement. Number 62, Takashi Torotani. The best defensive shortstop of the turn of the 2010s, although he never got the recognition he deserved for it, there is a reason why the Tigers signed him to the biggest contract a rookie has ever received, and it was 100% worth it. Torotani holds several Tigers records, as well as several records for shortstops as a whole. Big Bird didn't miss a single game between 2005 and 2018, and sits second all-time on the Iron Man list after Sachio Kinugasa. Number 61, Futoshi Nakanishi. Back to the 50s, where we meet another face of the Lions. From 1952 to 1958, there was no better third baseman in all of NPB. Nakanishi nearly won 4 batting triple crowns in his career, but came up 1 award short each time. If we ignore the back half of his career, he'd be much higher on the list. Sadly, Nakanishi never knew when to cut his losses. After 1958, he was never able to play a full season. nor was he able to mimic the rate stats he'd accumulated in the front half of his career. This, plus Oshita's retirement, sent the Lions on a steady downward spiral that they would not recover from until the 80s. Number 60, Kazuhiro Wada. There are late bloomers, and then there is Big Ben, Kazuhiro Wada. Wada didn't play his first full season until he was 30 years old, and from there he never looked back. In fact, he managed to pull off his best season at age 38 when he cranked 37 dingers and had a 1061 OPS, making him the oldest player to win CL MVP. He was also a plus defender until he was 41 years old, which is just insane. Number 59, Tomoyuki Sugina. The modern ace of the Giants, Sugino has been lights out since he first stepped on the mound in 2013. 2 MVPs, 2 Sawamura Awards, 4 ERA titles, Gold Gloves and Best Nines, and 2 Strikeout King Awards. I don't know what else there is to say. If not for the pandemic, he'd definitely be pitching in MLB right now, but I'm sure the Giants are very glad that he isn't. Number 58, Hiromitsu Karata. Coming from humble beginnings, Karata was the stereotypical power hitter. Big boy who hits bombs. That's it, that's all. Despite feuding constantly with Katsuya Nomura and his mistress, and being labeled as a team cancer, Karata proved to outlast Nomura within the Hawks organization. After the Hawks were acquired by Daiei and were set to move to Fukuoka, Karata initially refused to join them and was traded to the Oryx Braves in 1989, although he would finish his career with the Hawks in 1992. He sits 3rd all-time on the home runs list with 567. Number 57, Tokuji Aida. Known as the Buddhist thanks to his calm demeanor, Aida joined the Hawks in 1947. He started slow at first, but by his second season he was among the elite hitters in the JBL. He would man first base for the Hawks for the next decade until he was moved to center field. Now, putting a first baseman in center field sounds like a recipe for disaster, but he generated over 14 WAR in 2 seasons out there. He was also fantastic on the base paths, stealing 40 or more bases 6 years in a row. Aida was far from your typical first baseman in many respects, only hitting 25 homers in a season once. Still, the 1955 PL MVP was one of the first great players to suit up for the Hawks franchise. His time with the Swallows is best forgotten. Number 56, Hirato Asamura. After a decade manning second base for the Seibu Lions and establishing himself as the best second baseman in Pacific League, Asamura took his talents to Tohoku and immediately became the face of the Eagles' offense, putting up back-to-back 30-homer seasons as the Eagles roared back into contention. Despite a down year in 2021, he still led the Eagles in WAR with 5.7. Number 55, Tomoaki Kanemoto. One of many stars of the 90s Carp who went on to have success elsewhere, the 2005 Central League MVP was the best left fielder in NPB for the better part of 2 decades. Although he was hampered by the mid-90s dead ball, Kanemoto still put up 6 30-home run campaigns and even a 40-homer campaign in 2005. Number 54, Hiromichi Ishige. Often overshadowed by his Lions teammates, the 1986 PL MVP was a perennial All-Star, Best 9 recipient, and Gold Glover. His time in Fukuoka is best forgotten though. He was an elite defender on the left side of the infield and had 14 straight seasons with a positive DRS, not dipping into the negative until he joined the Hawks. Can you tell I think he should have retired before he joined the Hawks? Number 53, Yoshio Yoshida. From one elite defender to another, Yoshida roamed Koshen's middle infield for 16 years and was consistently elite, which made up for his average hitting. He also has 2 50 stolen base seasons under his belt and remains the only Hanshin Tigers manager to have won a championship at the helm. Number 52, Kenta Maeda. Maeda was the ace of the Carp during some very dark years, and picked up 3 ERA titles and 2 Sawamura Awards, as well as 2 Strikeout King Awards, easily making him the best pitcher of the early 2010s. Sadly, he left right when the Carp were building momentum. Had he stuck around, he might well have 2 rings to his name. Number 51, Alex Cabrera, Senor Brazos Grandes. Alex Cabrera's first 3 campaigns in NPB are legendary. 49, 55, and 52 homers respectively, winning PL MVP honors in 2002. Now, was he on steroids? Possibly. We can prove that he was before and after, but not during his time in Japan. So in order to avoid receiving a nice letter from Senor Cabrera's legal team, I'm not going to make a definitive statement. Juiced or not, Cabrera was too good not to make the list, although he didn't quite make the top 50. Number 50, Known as the Don, Tatsurohiro Oka was the first great member of the Nankai Hawks, which is saying something because he didn't start playing with them full time until he was 30. He originally joined the Nankai Baseball Club in 1939 and was easily their best player, hitting 10 home runs in an era where the average player only hit 2. But he was drafted into the army in 1940. Nankai used their influence to keep him in Japan and out of danger, and he was assigned to an anti-aircraft unit in Kagoshima. He was commanding the unit not long after. I'm mentioning this because Tatsurohiro Oka himself credits this experience as the foundation of his leadership skills, something he would bring to the team when he rejoined it in 1946 as a player manager. He picked up right where he left off on the field too, putting up elite offensive numbers while playing above average defense no matter where he put himself in the infield. He would retire in 1952 to focus on managing, and would lead the Hawks through their first golden era before retiring in 1968. If not for the war interrupting his career, it's tempting to think just how high Tatsurohiro Oka could have climbed on this list. Number 49, the third man to carry the moniker Mr. Tigers, Koichi Tabuchi was, simply put, the best catcher of the 70s, putting up great defense and unreal numbers at the plate, including 7 straight seasons with a WRC plus of over 140. Because the Tigers can't seem to do right by their stars, Tabuchi was traded to the Lions in 1979. As a DH with the Lions, Tabuchi kept up his elite hitting, putting up 43 homers in 1980, as well as being a strong presence in the locker room as the Lions transitioned from a joke of a franchise to the Kings of Pacific League. His last hurrah came in 1983, where despite only playing 82 games, he still hit 30 home runs and put up a 1020 OPS as the Lions picked up their second championship in a row. He has the second highest home run rate in NPB history, hitting one every 12.41 at-bats. Number 48. Known as the Hawks' Claw, Yoshinori Hirose led off in the Hawks order for the better part of 2 decades. While he carried an absurdly low walk rate, reflected in his career 326 OBP, he also had a ludicrously low strikeout rate as well as blazing speed, which helped him win the Stolen Base King award 5 years in a row. He also played elite defense both at shortstop and in center field, further boosting his value to an already stacked Hawks team. Although the last 5 years of his career are best forgotten and probably dropped him down the list, Hirose is still one of the greatest Hawks of all time. Number 47. The Uncrowned King. Donning the great Katsuya Nomura's batting helmet, Kazuhiro Kiyohara spent 2 decades as the most feared Japanese slugger in NPB. Just one catch. He never led the league in home runs. Not once. 22 seasons, 7 30-homer campaigns, and not once did he lead the league. In fact, the only stat-based awards he received were his 3 OBP King awards and 1 award for having the most game-winning RBI in a season. His non-stat-based trophy case is fairly empty too. 5 gold gloves, only 3 best 9s. Still, regardless of that, and all the other things that happened after his career, Kiyo-san is still one of the best players in the 90s and would be in the Hall of Fame already if not for those aforementioned post-playing days problems. Number 46. The Eternal Giant. Tatsunori Hara wasn't just the face of his club during his playing career, he was the face of Japanese athletics as a whole. Aside from his squeaky clean reputation, his calm and friendly demeanor, and his excellent leadership skills, he was really good at baseball. I mean, obviously. His first 6 seasons locking down the hot corner for the Kyojin saw him put up at least 10 defensive runs 5 times, and a move to the corner outfield in 1989 ended up working out really well. Like the previously mentioned Kiyohara, Hara put up elite offense but was never the best in the league. He led the league in winning RBI twice, and in RBI as a whole once, but never in any other category. Still, with Warren Cromartie and Sadaaki Yoshimura by his side, the 80s Giants offense was a force to be reckoned with. Number 45. The man of many names. Toshio Naka changed his name to Mitsuo Naka in 1964, and then to Akatsuki Naka the next year, before going back to his birth name in 1971 when he took over as the Dragons player manager. That weirdness aside, his family name, Naka, was very appropriate, as he was an elite defensive center fielder for most of the 50s and 60s, using his speed and range to make fantastic plays that you can only read about because the Dragons weren't on TV, because they were bad. Naka also won a batting title seemingly out of nowhere in 1967, a year after he put up the best season of his career. Number 44. Known simply as Aki through most of his playing career, Koji Akiyama was one of the best offensive players of the power-mad 80s. 930 homer seasons in a row, the first 3 of which were 40-homer campaigns. And he did this while picking up 10 straight gold gloves and even managing a triple-3 season in 1989. In 1994, he'd signed one of the first massive free agent deals in NPB history, joining the Daiei Hawks, immediately becoming the leader in the locker room as the Hawks transitioned from 2 decades of mediocrity to a Pacific League contender by the turn of the millennium. Number 43, former Oklahoma State Senator Randy Bass, to make a long story short, is an NPB legend. 2 Triple Crowns, an MVP award, 3 Best Nines, 2 OBP King Awards, and the single season record for batting average. 5th in the single season home runs list, and a lifetime 3-4-6 hitter. Randy is easily the best foreign hitter the Hanshin Tigers have ever had, and how did they reward him? They cut him because they didn't want to pay the medical expenses that they were contractually obligated to pay for the surgery to remove his son's brain tumor. A decision made to save a measly $40,000. That would end up costing them a hell of a lot more down the line. Since Randy didn't want to Wally Pip anyone, he would retire, despite offers from the Dragons, Hawks, and Swallows. If the Tigers hadn't been so boneheaded, there's no doubt in my mind that Randy would be a top 25 player on this list. Number 42, Makoto Kozuru. NPB's first 50-homer man, Makoto Kozuru took advantage of the juiced ball in 1950 to hit 51 home runs in NPB's inaugural season, something no one would do again until 1963. This earned him the first ever Central League MVP award. After the Robins merged with the Taiyo Whales following the 1952 season, Kozuru would join the Hiroshima Carp and become the offensive face of the franchise, despite never coming near the heights of his 1950 campaign again. Kozuru would never have a below-average offensive season and finished with a career WRC Plus of 143. Number 41. After the departure of Koichi Tabuchi, the moniker of Mr. Tigers transferred to Masayuki Kakefu. Kakefu was the best third baseman in Central League around the turn of the 80s, leading them in home runs 3 times, as well as putting up 4,000 OPS seasons. However, a series of injuries in 1986 effectively ended his career, and he would retire after the 1988 season. He sat second on the Hanshin Tigers leaderboard with 349 home runs, and had a career OPS of 913. Number 40. When the Nippon Ham Fighters packed up and left Tokyo for Hokkaido in 2003, the face of their franchise gained a new nickname, the Northern Samurai. Michihiro Ogasawara was just that. Rocking a glorious goatee and a batting stance that said, "Come at me," Ogasawara was the driving force behind a team known more for its pitching prowess when they won the Japan Series in 2006, picking up PL MVP as the Fighters won their first title in 44 years. Naturally, he got poached by the Giants, was forced to shave, and won CL MVP the very next year in 2007. He hit 30 homers 10 times in 11 seasons before a plethora of injuries derailed his career. He did put up 2 decent injury-plagued seasons with the Dragons to close out his Hall of Fame career, but he'd lost all pop in his bat and called it a career in 2015. Guts was the second player in NPB history to win MVP in both leagues, something no one has done since. Number 39. Dubbed the Hitting Machine, Kihachi Enomoto spent 15 years manning first base for the Orions as they changed names, owners, stadiums, and identities. One thing stayed the same. He raked. While you might look at his personal best home run total of 24 and scoff, you have to remember that despite the achievements of some guys still to come on this list, NPB in the 1960s wasn't as power mad as some people make it out to be in retrospect. While Enomoto only had 3 20-homer campaigns, he still won 2 batting titles and led Pacific League in hits 4 times, regularly putting up 40 to 50 extra base hits in a season. Don't be a slave to home runs. The man raked. Number 38. Kaz Matsui is the typical tale of a career in 2 halves, as Little Godzilla spent the first 9 years of his career as the best shortstop of the late 90s with the Cebu Lions. He then tried his hand at MLB, then came back to play 7 years with the Rakuten Eagles. With the Lions, he was an elite 5-tool shortstop who led the league in steals 3 years in a row. And with the Eagles, he was a leader and a mentor to a young team that looked to put Tohoku on their backs in the wake of tragedy. Both fan bases remember him fondly for it, and he looks to be a no-doubt first-ballot Hall of Famer the second he's eligible. Number 37. So far we've talked about the third and fourth Mr. Tigers, but who was the first? That would be Fumio Fujimura. Originally a pitcher, Fujimura transferred to the infield in the second half of 1937 and never looked back. After nearly losing his leg and later his life in the Second World War, he returned home suffering from obvious PTSD, which affected his play. He wouldn't really regain form until 1948. In 1949, he became the first player to hit 40 homers in a season, hitting 46, although that record would stand for just 1 year. He transitioned to player-manager in 1950 and would hold the job until he retired in 1957. His number 10 was the first number to be retired by the Tigers. Number 36? Ah yes, the man whose jersey got a bunch of kids sent to the principal's office when he played over here, Kosuke Fukudome was an OBP god in his first stint with the Chunichi Dragons, topping out at a whopping .443 in 2007. Ring secured, he spent some time in MLB, mainly in Chicago, before coming back to Japan with the Hanshin Tigers, where he continued to be an OBP machine, even if he wasn't quite as good. Unbelievably, as of writing this video, he's still playing, now back with the Dragons, on the cusp of entering his age 45 season. Whether or not that's a good thing, I'll let Dragons fans decide. Number 35. Born Paul Ryong-lee in Busan, South Korea, and moving to Japan at the age of 8, Hideo Fujimoto signed with the Giants out of university and joined an elite pitching staff, where he got to spend his first year behind Victor Starfin and Shuichi Hirose. But by 1943, Starfin had come down with disease and Hirose got drafted, leaving Fujimoto as the lone ace of the Giants. He would go on to put up one of the best pitching seasons of all time, with the caveats that A, the talent pool was seriously depleted because, war, and B, this was Japan's Deadpool era. Still, .73 ERA and 432 2/3 innings of work. What the fuck? Following the war, Fujimoto spent a season with the Dragons in order to clear his head and reconnect with some of his old university buddies, but he would return to the Giants in 1948, picking up a Sawamura Award in 1949, but once again, the workload took its toll, as he played a lone game in 1955, tossing 5 innings solely for the purpose of getting his 200th win. He called it a career that evening. Number 34. Known by the awesome moniker Bion the Demon Sergeant, Takehiko Besho, born Akira Besho, dropped out of university in 1942 to join Nankai Baseball Club, which was a very risky move considering being enrolled in university had kept him out of the war. He'd stay with the club until 1948 when he requested a trade to the Giants and changed his name to Takehiko on the recommendation of a priest at a shrine in Chiba. This weirded out his new teammates, and his number choice weirded them out even more, because he chose 29. Why? Because he really liked the look of the B-29 Super Fortress and wanted to appear just as imposing. That's not a joke. He would switch to a more common pitcher number, 11 in 1950, after seeing Joe Fireman Page pitch in the 1949 World Series. Besho also had a fascination with getting his 300th win, even trying to get it put into contracts that he should start 35 games a year, even when he was obviously declining. He'd get his 300th win in 1958, but insisted in staying another year to beat Victor Starfin's win total of 303. He got to 310, then he retired, only for his record to be beaten 2 years later. Number 33. From the distant past back to the present, Saint Seiya Suzuki has been one of the faces of the Hiroshima Carp since the departure of ace Kenta Maeda. Seiya has been an absolute monster, putting up a 945 OPS in his 9 seasons, bringing 5-tool production that has made him the best player in Central League over the last 2 years. At the time of writing this, Seiya has been posted, and although it's pretty clear that he wants to sign in North America, should the 2022 lockout not end in time, he'll be back, and he'll surely climb further up this list. Number 32. Originally a running back for the AAFC San Francisco 49ers, Wally Unamine would be released by the team following a broken wrist and decided to focus on baseball, joining the Salt Lake City Bees and catching the attention of San Francisco Seals manager Lefty O'Doul and Yomiuri Giants scout Kapi Harada. He'd signed with the Giants in 1951 and went on to be a star. Yonamine's running back build gave him the power and speed to become an elite hitter right out of the gate, winning 3 batting titles and becoming the first American to win MVP in the NPB era in 1957. He joined the Chunichi Dragons in 1961 and would convince Larry Doby and Don Newcomb to join the club for half the season, basically acting as a player, coach, and interpreter. After a slow start to the 1962 season, he'd move behind the Dragons bench full-time. Yonamine is one of only 3 Americans in the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame, along with Tadashi Wakabayashi and Lefty O'Doul. Number 31. Almost unanimously regarded as the second best catcher in NPB history, Shinosuke Abe was indisputably the best catcher of the 2000s, although an injury in 2015 forced him to move to first base. When Abe was behind the plate, he was simply brilliant, something that generally doesn't correlate well with his 30-homer pop, which made him the best offensive catcher since Koichi Tabuchi. Speaking of guys that carried the Mr. Tigers moniker, Masayuki Kakefu is his godfather. Abe would retire after the 2019 season, coming back solely to get his 400th career home run. He finished with 406. Number 30. The second man to carry the name Mr. Buffaloes, Tuffy Rhodes is, without a doubt, the greatest American player in NPB history. Name an offensive category. He either leads all foreign players or sits second. He put up a whopping 7 40-homer campaigns, had a career WRC plus of 152, hit 464 home runs, 775 extra base hits. Put him in the Hall of Fame, you cowards! Sorry, got a little heated there. Number 29. Before Seiya Suzuki, there was Yoshihiro Maru. Maru won back-to-back MVPs in 2017 and 2018 during the Carps' mini run of dominance to close the decade, as he completed his transition from a speedy base stealer to a legitimate power threat. He signed with the Giants in 2019 and has kept up solid production, admittedly without nearly as much fanfare. Still only 32 years old, Maru has the opportunity to climb higher up this list, provided he stays consistent. Number 28. The Japanese Rickey Henderson, Yutaka Fukumoto is the most prolific base stealer in NPB history, swiping a record 106 bags in 1972. Fukumoto's patience, timing, and ability to read a pitcher, coupled with instruction from Olympic 400-meter runner Kiyoshi Asai, turned him into an unstoppable force on the base pass, winning 13 straight Stolen Base King awards and 13 Gold Gloves as a rangy defender in center field. When Fukumoto stole his 939th base, passing Lou Brock for the all-time lead in stolen bases, he stated that his end goal was 1,107 because his birthday was November 7th. He never got that opportunity. After an injury-plagued 1988 season, the Hankyu Braves accidentally announced his retirement, and Fukumoto basically shrugged and went, "Guess it's official then," and never played again, despite saying that he could go for another 3 years at least. When Rickey Henderson eventually broke Fukumoto's record in 1992, Fukumoto presented him with a pair of golden spikes, and was shocked when Henderson gave him the base. Like, the actual base he stole for his 1066th. Number 27. So we've covered the first Mr. Tigers, the third Mr. Tigers, the fourth Mr. Tigers, and even a guy some consider to be the fifth Mr. Tigers. So who was the second? That would be Minoru Murayama. As a freaking rookie, he set the NPB record for lowest ERA in a season, 1.19. Yep, 1.19, while pitching in 56 games, starting 26 of them, and completing 19 of those, 7 of which were shutouts. He struck out a whopping 294 batters and put up 9.4 WAR, winning the first of 3 Sawamura awards. Surely he won Rookie of the Year, right? Nope, it was given to Wales third baseman Takeshi Kuwata. Now, don't get me wrong, Kuwata was a good player. I actually have him ranked 103rd, but he wasn't that good that year. The scariest part? Murayama wasn't done. He'd go on to put up a 1.2 ERA in 1961, a 1.96 ERA in 1965, and a 1.55 ERA in 1966. The piece de resistance? 0.98 in 1970. And he didn't win an ERA title for 1965 or 1966. Don't let anyone tell you that NPB in the 60s was offense heavy. Number 26. Known as the God of Batting, Tetsuharu Kawakami was the first great Giants first baseman, joining the Giants straight out of high school in 1938. He initially struggled to get off the ground as a pitcher, but thanks to the tutelage of manager Sadayoshi Fujimoto and the Giants' Filipino power bat Adelano Rivera, Kawakami became one of the best power hitters in the JBL pretty much overnight, winning his first batting title while leading the JBL in hits and RBI. The next year, he hit a league-leading 9 home runs, and then the year after that, he'd win his second batting title and first MVP award. He'd go on to win 3 more batting titles and 2 more MVPs in his 18-year career. And after he retired, he picked out a certain half-Chinese kid to become his protege, a kid who, like him, was a failed pitcher looking for a way to stay with the team, but we'll get to him later. Number 25. The Prince of Persia, Yu Darvish broke onto the NPB scene in 2005 and put up a 3.53 ERA as a teenager. He'd then put up a 2.89 ERA and led the Fighters to their first title in 44 years. Then he'd put up 5 straight seasons with a sub-2 ERA. Yep, 5 straight. During that time he won 2 MVPs, 3 Strikeout King awards, and 2 ERA titles. Again, don't let anyone tell you NPB is strictly offense heavy. He was so scary that in the 2007 Japan series, the Dragons pulled their starting pitcher in the middle of a perfect game because Darvish was the one on the bump for the Fighters, and he'd only given up a lone run. It's no wonder he won the Isau Shibata award that year. In his final season before jumping over, Darvish put up 10.5 WAR and a FIP minus of 44. No wonder Texas flashed the cash to get him. Number 24. Remember how I mentioned that Michihiro Ogasawara was the second NPB player to win MVP in both leagues? Well, meet the first. Despite appearing slightly tubby and out of shape, Yutaka Inatsu was one of the most dangerous pitchers in NPB history, winning 6 straight Strikeout King awards from his rookie season onwards, even picking up a Sawamura award in his age 20 season. Inatsu is the only pitcher in NPB history to walk off their own no-hitter, something he did in 1973. After being traded to the Nankai Hawks, he became a closer and picked up 5 Save King awards, 2 Fireman awards, and 2 MVP awards, and 3 rings in his final years before attempting to sign in MLB with the Milwaukee Brewers, only to retire when he was offered a minor league deal out of camp. Sounds like a surefire Hall of Famer, right? Well, he's not, because in 1970 he got wrapped up in the Black Mist scandal, a sports betting scandal that also affected the aforementioned Masahiro Doi and Masaaki Ikenaga. They could never pin anything on Inatsu, but he received a strong warning from the league and that was enough. So to all you boomers who whine and bitch about Pete Rose, just know it could be much worse. Pete actually got caught. Number 23. Only 6 players have hit 200 hits in a season in NPB, and only one man has done it twice, Nori Aoki. For the second half of the 2000s, Aoki was the most dangerous contact hitter in NPB, becoming the face of the Tokyo Swallows after Atsuya Furuta's retirement. He'd lead the league in hits twice, won 3 batting titles, and was a regular Gold Glover and Best 9 member. Nori would jump over to MLB in 2011, bounced around several different organizations before coming home in 2018 and picking up pretty much right where he left off, now a veteran presence on a young and hungry team that just picked up their first Japan series since 2001. Number 22. Known derogatorily as the gaijin who spoke Japanese thanks to his rebellious attitude, one can only imagine how far up the list Hiromitsu Ochiai would have been had he done things properly and not pissed off his high school and university coaches. Ochiai originally played baseball for Toshiba's company team and became too good to ignore, getting drafted by the Lotte Orions in the 3rd round of the 1978 draft. Ochiai's headstrong, me-first attitude was backed up by his play, joining Michio Arito and the Lee brothers as the core of the Orions offense, winning his first Triple Crown in 1982. Ochiai would pick up 2 more in 1985 and 1986, giving him the most Triple Crowns in NPB history. He then had successful stints with the Dragons and Giants, finally winning his first ring at 41 years old in 1994. All the while, he remained an OBP god, picking up 400 OBP every year from 1981 to 1993. He'd play up until his age 46 season in 1998, before finally retiring with the 2nd highest on-base percentage in history, a whopping .422, with a career WRC plus of 161. I could honestly make an hour-long video on Ochiai if I had access to all the archival footage, but suffice to say, had he entered the league at 18 or 22 instead of 27, easily a top 5 player of all time. Number 21. When Makun returned to the Golden Eagles in 2021, the outpouring of love and support was like nothing else. The Eagles may have only existed for less than 20 years, but the fact that they already have an all-time great like Tanaka is testament to how this team rose from the ashes of the Kintetsu Buffaloes into the perennial contender that they are today. Tanaka's 2011, 2012, and 2013 were nothing short of insane, and he put the entire region of Tohoku on his back following the devastation caused by the earthquake and tsunami that killed thousands. In 2013, he went a whopping 24-0. While win-loss record is largely irrelevant, not losing a single decision is still noteworthy. He even went a perfect 4-for-4 in save situations, including the most important one of his career. When he came back, Makun picked up right where he left off as the ace of a truly elite Eagles staff ready to make another big run. Number 20. Nicknamed the Japanese ace with blue eyes, Viktor Konstantinovich Starfin was born in Nizhny Tagil, Russia, moving to Asahikawa, Hokkaido as a toddler to escape the Russian Civil War. His large and imposing frame made him a top prospect, with several universities offering him a scholarship to play for them. However, his father was soon arrested and charged with killing his mistress in an argument, and Yomiuri president Matsutaro Shoriki used this to blackmail Starfin into joining the team that would later become the Tokyo Giants. Even though teammate Aji Sawamura has the mythology backing him up, it was Starfin who was the real ace of those clubs, especially after Sawamura injured his shoulder in a grenade throwing competition. But, thanks to his Russian heritage, he was thrown into a concentration camp in 1944. After the war, he refused to rejoin the Giants and instead joined the Taiyo Robins before being traded to the Daiei Stars, where he'd be the face of the franchise for his 6 seasons there. He'd have trouble adapting to the newer, livelier baseball, but he continued to play until 1955 when he picked up his 300th win, the first pitcher in NPB history to do so. Starfin would have a hard time adjusting to life outside of baseball, and the drinking problem he picked up in the concentration camp would eventually spiral out of control, leading to a fatal car accident in 1957, which some have speculated to be suicide. Number 19. If you want to talk about contact hitters, Shogo Akiyama has to be in the conversation. From 2015 to 2019, Shogo averaged 180 hits a season, as well as 3 20-homer campaigns, as his Seibu Lions became the lone team to challenge the almighty SoftBank Hawks. Had he not bailed to join the Cincinnati Reds, it's entirely possible that Shogo could have been the second player in NPB history to rack up 3,000 hits, as he had over 1,400 in his first 9 seasons. His time with the Reds has left a bit to be desired, so it's entirely possible that he could come back and either rise or fall in these rankings. Number 18. Known as the god of the forkball, Shigeru Sugishita may not have invented the pitch, but he definitely perfected it. Joining many of his Meiji University teammates on the Shinichi Dragons in 1949, Sugishita immediately became the ace of the staff, racking up strikeouts with his devastating forkball and winning a pitching triple crown, Sawamura Award, and Central League MVP in 1954. He'd also win Japan Series MVP as the Dragons grabbed their first title. But throwing 300 innings a year with a pitch as taxing as the forkball didn't end well, and he'd retire in 1958. Briefly returning to pitch for the Daimai Orions in 1961 before calling it a career. Now 96, Sugishita is still very active within the Dragons organization, teaching the forkball to anyone who wants to learn it, while also cautioning against its negative effects. Number 17. If you want to talk peak performance in NPB history, look no further than Roberto Petahine. In his first 6 seasons in Japan, he put up 530 homer campaigns and racked up 39.9 WAR, winning 3 Gold Gloves and an MVP award that probably should have gone to Atsunori Inaba. After trying and failing to make an MLB comeback and spending 2 years in KBO, Petahine would join the Hawks at age 39 for one last ride, and proved to be a veteran presence on a Hawks team that won the PL pennant, but ultimately fell to the Marines in the PLCS. Number 16. Before the aforementioned Minoru Murayama became ace of the staff, the Hanshin Tigers' best pitcher was Masaaki Koyama. Koyama was the originator of the palm ball and used it to tear through Central League's best hitters in the late 50s and early 60s, picking up a Sawamura Award in 1962. After having a down year and feuding with Murayama, he was traded to the Tokyo Orions in 1964, and despite Tokyo Stadium being smaller than Koshien, he flourished, putting up 3 straight seasons with a sub-3 ERA and bringing the Orions back to respectability. When it was announced that the Orions were going to spend half a season in Sendai, Koyama refused to join them and requested a trade, spending his final season with the Taiyo Whales. Number 15. Joining the Giants as a fresh-faced 19-year-old in 1938, Shigeru Chiba would man second base for the club for most of the next 2 decades, despite missing 4 years thanks to World War II. Known as the Bull, Chiba is arguably the best defensive second baseman in NPB history, even when he became player-manager of the Giants in 1951. In 1959, he was hired to manage the Kintetsu Pearls, but insisted on a name change, and the name he put forth, Buffaloes, still adorns the shell of what once was that team today. Chiba is another one of those guys who would have raked in the Gold Glove Awards had they existed during his playing days, and he wrote several books on defensive strategy in baseball after he retired. Number 14. Yasumitsu Toyota burst onto the scene as the best shortstop in NPB in 1953, hitting 27 homers and backing it up with 25 steals and above-average defense. While he'd never have that kind of pop in his bat again, he was still the best shortstop in Pacific League for the next decade, as the Nishitetsu lines experienced their first golden age. After an extremely unpopular trade to the Kokotetsu Swallows in 1963, Toyota would transfer into a leadership role, eventually becoming player-manager of what was then the Sankei Atoms in 1968 and 1969. NPB wouldn't see a shortstop as offensively gifted as Toyota until the mid-2000s. Number 13. Born Hunjang to Korean immigrants in Hiroshima in 1940, the first 5 years of Isao Harimoto's life were marked by tragedy after tragedy. He grew up dirt poor in a barracks, he was looked down on for his Korean heritage, and he burned his right hand so severely at age 4 that he lost all motor function in his index, middle, and ring fingers. A year later, he survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. He remembers waking up in the rubble of his ruined house, covered in his injured mother's blood. 2 days later, he had to watch his older sister Tenko die from the burns she got in the bombing. He then lost his father to a freak accident when he was trying to resettle them in Korea. And after surviving all of that, Isao Harimoto became one of the greatest baseball players in NPB history. Originally playing for his hometown Hiroshima Carp, Harimoto got a better offer from the Toei Flyers, and would win Rookie of the Year in 1959. He'd pick up his first batting title in 1961, and would lead the Flyers to their first Japan Series in 1962. He was the face of the franchise for his 15 years with the club, but would eventually fall out with new owners Nippon Ham. After being traded to the Yomiuri Giants in 1976, he would put up 3 solid seasons before signing with the Lotte Orions in order to pick up his 500th home run, and become the first Japanese member of the 3,000 hit club. After retiring, he would become a chief consultant when the South Korean government founded KBO in the early 80s, and remains a special assistant to the KBO commissioner to this day. The fact that his number 10 isn't retired by the Fighters is a damn shame, and probably should be rectified in the near future. Number 12. The best second baseman of this generation also happens to be the best of all time. Tatsuri Yamada, or Mr. 333, has achieved the feat a whopping 3 times. No one else has even done it twice. On top of his offensive domination, which included putting up a 195 WRC plus in 2015, Yamada has also had a few plus defensive seasons, boosting his value even more. The 2015 CL MVP winner is still only 29 and looks to keep up his current pace for years to come, and the Swallows are all the better for it. Number 11, Hayato Sakamoto. There's a similar story at shortstop. Since his first full season in 2008, no infielder has been anywhere near as good as Hayato Sakamoto. For most of the 2010s, Sakamoto was a 5-tool player. He could beat you with his bat, his glove, and his legs, becoming the first shortstop to win a batting title in Central League history. And he was the youngest right-handed batter to join the 2000 hit club, which he did in 2020 at age 31. If he keeps up his current pace, he might well be the second player in NPB history to join the 3000 hit club, and the third Japanese player to do so in all of baseball. Hayato can do it all, and can deservedly be called the greatest shortstop in NPB history. Number 10. When Ichiro Suzuki suited up for Aikadai Maiden High School, his coach called him an alien, and when he broke out in 1994, all of Japan saw what he was talking about. In his first full season, Ichiro broke Fumio Fujimura's record for hits in a season, becoming the first player to get 200. The next season, he'd hit 25 home runs, just 3 short of Nobuhiko Matsunaka for the league lead. A year after that, he picked up his 3rd straight MVP as the Oryx Blue Wave finally got over the hump to win the 1996 Japan Series. And when he got over here in 2001, well, you know the rest. That's out of my purview, but I will say this. Ichiro won a batting title, best 9, and Gold Glove award every single full-time season he played, and won 5 Hit King awards and OBP King awards on top of that. He is the best Japanese player in MLB history, full stop, and had he not gone over, he'd definitely be top 5 on this list. Number 9. If you're listing the best catchers in baseball history and you're not including Katsuya Moose Nomura, you are doing yourself a disservice. Elite on both sides of the ball, even when he was a player manager, Nomura sits second all-time on the NPB home run leaderboard with 657. Third place Hiromitsu Karata trails him by 90. He was the first NPB player to win a batting triple crown in 1965, was a 5-time MVP, and led Pacific League in home runs 9 times, leading them in RBI 7 times, playing the second most games in NPB history. After all that, he went on to become one of the most successful managers in NPB history, leading the Tokyo Swallows to 3 championships in the mid-90s. Moose didn't hang up the cleats for good until 2009, 55 years after he first suited up for the Nankai Hawks in 1954. There is simply no other catcher even in his atmosphere, and few managers who were more successful. Katsuya Nomura lived and breathed baseball, and despite his personal faults, the baseball world misses him dearly. Number 8. Mr. Red Helmet. Say that name in Hiroshima and everyone will know who you're talking about. You want a prototypical 5-tool player? Look no further than Koji Yamamoto. The hometown boy is the best player the Hiroshima Carp have ever had. Full stop. Yamamoto won 10 straight Gold Glove awards, 2 MVPs, and hit 40 home runs and put up an OPS of over 1,000 5 years in a row. Yamamoto sits 4th on the all-time home run list with 536 and is, for what it's worth, the only member of the 500 home run club with a university degree, which he got playing for Hosei University in the Tokyo Big Six. Number 7. Known as the master of hitting, Kazuhiro Yamauchi was the best power hitter of the 50s. Full stop. Putting up 9 seasons with an OPS over 900 and 10 with a WRC plus over 160, while averaging 60 extra base hits a year, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more prolific power hitter in that decade. In 1963, he became the first player in NPB history to hit 300 home runs, and was 4 away from joining the 400 club when he retired in 1970. He's one of only 5 position players to finish with a career WAR over 100, and is easily the best player to never win a Japan Series ring, despite making the big dance twice in his career. He also had a long and successful coaching career after he retired, including coaching the French national baseball team with Yoshio Yoshida in the early 90s. It's a travesty that it took until 2002 for him to be inducted into the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame. About 30 years too late in my opinion. But he's there, and that's all that matters. Number 6. The best player of the current generation, Yuki Yanagita is basically Koji Yamamoto 2.0. 345 at the plate with 30 homer pop. While he probably won't finish anywhere near Yamamoto thanks to his slow start and lost 2019 season, Yanagita is easily the best outfielder in NPB history. Want proof? His 2015 season, where he pulled off a triple 3 with a triple slash of 363, 469, 631, and had a range factor of 12. When Gita is healthy, he is the scariest player in the league, and there's a reason he's become the face of the Hawks dynasty of the 2010s. Number 5. Debuting for the Swallows at 16 years of age, Masaichi Kanida, born Kyung-hong Kim, was a 6-foot-tall beanpole whose fastball topped out near 100 miles an hour. A month after his 18th birthday, he threw a no-hitter, becoming the lone teenager to do so in NPB history. And by the time he hung up the cleats in 1969, he'd won 3 Sawamura Awards, 10 Strikeout King Awards, a Triple Crown, 400 games, and had thrown nearly 4,500 strikeouts. Because the Swallows were almost never competitive during the 15 years he played for them, the only major pitching record he doesn't own is ERA. Kaneda would be traded to the Giants after a feud with ownership and would win 5 straight titles in the middle of their stacked rotation before calling it a career. It's hard to find a more prolific pitcher in baseball history, both in terms of stats and attitude, as he held the record for most ejections as a player until Tuffy Rhodes passed him in the mid-2000s. He'd keep it up as a manager thanks to his penchant for kicking people he didn't like, whether that be players, other managers, or umpires. Number 4. So how could there possibly be a better pitcher than Kaneda? Well, look no further than the Iron Arm, the leader of the Pride, Kazuhisa Inao. No pitcher had a stronger peak than Inao, putting up 4 seasons with 9 or more WAR in a 5-year span, 2 of which were 11 WAR seasons. He was the ace of the Lions when they won their first 3 championships and won 2 pitching triple crowns in 1958 and 1961, and got 2/3 of the way there in 1957 and 1963. Though his career was derailed by a horrific shoulder injury in 1964, Inao was still an elite reliever in the post-injury years, especially in 1966, which is still one of the best relief seasons in NPB history, even though the save statistic wasn't tracked at the time. When he was at his peak, the Fukuoka newspapers ran with the headline, "God, Buddha, Inao." If there's a better description of his impact, I've yet to see it. Number 3. Earth-shattering power, an elite eye, a porn collection rivaled by few. All of these superlatives and more could be used to describe Hideki Matsui. Coming up in what was essentially a mini deadball era, when he hit 38 home runs in 1996, all of Japan took notice. And when he did it again, Godzilla proved that he was the second coming of Sadaharu O. In just 10 seasons, he hit 332 home runs, drove in 889, and won 3 MVPs and nearly won 3 Triple Crowns. Cruelly enough, the one time he won the batting title, he couldn't secure either the home run or RBI King awards, both of which went to Roberto Petahine. Still, Godzilla's stats remain mind-boggling, and had he decided to stay in Japan, there isn't a doubt in my mind he'd be 3rd or possibly even 2nd on the all-time home runs list. Number 2, Shigeo Nagashima, the face of baseball. Shigeo Nagashima was the all-Japanese face of the Giants from his debut in 1958 all the way up until, well, today. The Gehrig to O's Ruth, Nagashima nearly had a triple 3 season as a rookie, but missed first base on the final homer of the season. He'd go on to win 5 MVP awards, 6 batting titles, 5 RBI King awards, and led Central League in hits 10 times. Nagashima would even win 2 Home Run King awards before O's career took off. Even though his career numbers are thoroughly shattered by his teammate, Nagashima can take solace in one thing. Only 2 players in history have put up a 12-more season. Him and Fumio Fujimura. Not O, not Matsui, not Ichiro, just Nagashima and Fujimura. Number 1. Let's be real. You knew who it was going to be. I knew who it was going to be. How could it be anyone but the king, Sadaharu O? From 1963 to 1970, Sadaharu O put up at least 40 homers, 10 WAR, and 200 WRC+. Every year, for 8 years. If he retired in 1970, he'd still top this list handily. That's how good this guy was. And yet, he won 2 Triple Crowns after this stretch, in 1973 and 1974. And he played half-decent defense at first base too. I could go on and on about how good he was, but I'll leave it at 2 numbers. 868 home runs, 177.2 WAR. Nobody has hit as many homers as O, and only Babe Ruth was more valuable to his team. That's all you need to know. And that is the 100 greatest players in NPB history. Thank you so much for watching. This video has taken a while, so I would much appreciate it if you could like, comment, subscribe, and share it with anyone who you think might be interested. I'm going to go back to more of a regular schedule in the future. Love y'all. Have a good one.